G'day, Jareth. Can you tell us about yourself?
Sure. I grew up here in Melbourne. I've been married 15 years now. I've got two crazy but lovable kids. The older one's in primary school. He's a big fan of Super Mario, like me. My younger child is in kinder. In my spare time, I like to play vintage video games, and I do watch some cop shows with my wife. Lately though, I probably watch a lot more Peppa Pig and Paw Patrol than cop shows.
So what do you do for a crust?
As far as work goes, I've been a general practitioner for the last 11 years or so. It's a job with a lot of responsibility. It can be hard and tiring, but I've come to enjoy it. And a big part of that is that I work with a great bunch of people.
So tell us about your religious beliefs then.
Yeah, I'm a Christian, follower of Jesus. Like every human being, I'm far from perfect. I'm a sinner, but I believe that Jesus saves us from our sins. And I attend a great church which has a strong focus on teaching the Bible.
So tell us about what's happened over the last year or so.
Sure. Well, it's quite a long story. And to begin with, I had a couple of complaints made against me.
To your employer?
No, not to my employer, not to the clinic where I work. The complaints were actually made to the body which licenses all health practitioners in this country. So doctors, nurses, pharmacists, dentists and so on.
And who made the complaints?
I don't know who made them. Both of their identities have been kept from me. All I know is that they're not people that I know. They aren't any of the thousands of patients that I've looked after over the years.
So tell us about the nature of the complaints.
Well, Mark, they weren't about anything I'd done wrong at work. They weren't about malpractice, or they weren't about being rude to a patient or anything like that. In fact, I've never had a formal complaint made about my medical practice in 15 years. The complaints were actually about the views that I've expressed online, on social media, Facebook, so on.
So what sort of views are we talking about?
A whole range of things. In fact, one of the people who complained basically didn't like the fact that I'm politically conservative. He or she was disgruntled about my views on feminism, on men's rights, on maternity leave, immigration, crime, terrorism, Jordan Peterson, George Pell, euthanasia, etc. They complained about the fact that I shared an article by Chris Kenny from the Australian newspaper, articles by Andrew Bolt from the Herald Sun, even a Herald Sun cartoon by Mark Knight. You know, there was stuff there from Mark Stein, Robert Gagnon, Spiked, you name it. This person obviously has a lot of time on their hands. They trawled through years worth of stuff from my Facebook account, taking screenshots of every opinion they didn't like.
So it sounds like someone with a lot of time on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened after that?
Well, the medical board, they started investigating me after receiving the first complaint. But they didn't tell me that they were investigating me for 9 months.
For 9 months, they investigated you without telling you?
Yes. You know, the law actually says you can't do that, but that's another story. So they told me after 9 months. Then after 3 more months, they finally sent me a please explain letter.
So what was in the letter?
Several allegations. The main one being that I provided substandard healthcare to people from the LGBT community.
Was there any evidence for that?
No. As I said, none of my patients had made a complaint. And over the years, you know, I've looked after dozens of patients who would identify as gay and lesbian, and I treat them the same way that I treat as I treat everybody else. The evidence was stuff that they collected from my Facebook page, basically a collection of posts that I'd made during the gay marriage plebiscite back in 2017. As a Christian, I strongly supported the Vote No campaign, and I posted numerous things that year to persuade people to vote no. But someone had got it into their head that being strongly against gay marriage meant that I couldn't be a good doctor to people who identify as gay and lesbian.
Sounds pretty absurd.
Yeah, of course. You know, it's like thinking that a doctor who strongly opposes smoking or gambling can't be a good doctor to smokers and gamblers.
Right, so they've been through your Facebook page. The medical board has spent 9 months trawling through your Facebook posts. Is that right?
Yeah, look, get this. One of the things that they found and asked me to explain. It was an article that I shared a while back about how Oxford University was giving girls more time in the exams than boys. You know, I regularly share this kind of stuff, which shows how crazy our world is going.
Hang on, Oxford University, like this is an actual article that you just simply shared?
Yeah, they evidently didn't like it, and they asked me to explain, this was in their letter, they asked me to explain how my views about Oxford, well, what Oxford University was doing affects my medical practice.
And how did you respond to these allegations?
Well, I needed legal help, so I contacted the Human Rights Law Alliance. They're a legal firm, an Australian legal firm, which exists to help people who get in trouble for their beliefs. They were very supportive. One of their lawyers wrote a response on my behalf explaining how these allegations were false, and I had not provided bad medical care to anybody. And they also explained that I have a right to voice my beliefs and my political opinions.
So did that get the result you were after?
Yes and no. A few months later, we heard back from the medical board. On the one hand, they'd said that they decided the allegation about me providing poor care to the LGBT community was unsubstantiated, so they dropped that. But on the other hand, they went totally nuclear about the opinions that I'd expressed online. They'd actually gone and hired a company to do a forensic internet search. I'm told this costs tens of thousands of dollars. And they dug up basically everything I'd ever said online. There's really only two sources for that. There's Bill Muehlenberg's blog and my own personal Facebook page. I haven't commented on Bill's blog for about 7 years, so that stuff's really old.
Well, I'm told that Bill has over 5,000 articles on his website, and that's been going on for a very long time.
Yeah, that's right. So there was Bill's site, my Facebook page, and there was the only other thing was an article that I wrote for a Christian magazine in 2015 about transgenderism. But all of that together came to over 2,000 pages of material. I got sent that on in a PDF file.
Yeah.
100 meg.
So let me guess, they didn't like what they found.
Yeah, they sure didn't. Look, when it comes to politics, I have strong opinions. I've said blunt and provocative things at times. I've said a lot about abortion, about gay marriage, more recently about the transgender stuff. These topics are very important to me as a Christian. I think abortion's evil, it's killing helpless little babies, and I can't believe our society tolerates it. The gender stuff, it's insane, you know, it's completely absurd. It's doing a huge amount of harm to so many people.
So you're in trouble for expressing your opinion about these subjects?
Yes. And also some of the things I've said about Islamic terrorism, they don't seem happy about that. So for example, a couple of comments I made about Islamic terrorism in December 2014, right after that horrible terrorist attack on the Lindt Cafe in Sydney. Like many Australians, I'm very disturbed about the way that violent Islam has been affecting the world since 9/11. I don't think this is something we can just bury our heads in the sand about. You know, far too many people have died, and many more will die if nothing's done. I've made a few statements about it on Facebook over the years, nothing more radical than what journalists or some of the elected politicians have said, but these statements are now being used to paint me as a racist.
Never mind that you're Chinese.
I'm Chinese.
Yeah.
You know, you can see the white privilege oozing out of me, can't you?
So they've got to box you into their narrow categories somehow, even though you're Chinese, and even though the Islam as a race idea doesn't actually make sense. But what does any of this actually have to do with your work anyway? Why is your professional body getting interested about what you're saying outside of work?
Look, I was totally shocked at first. I'd been under the impression that voicing opinions about political and moral issues outside of work, it's not something that can land you in trouble, so long as your work isn't affected by your beliefs. Like I said earlier, the views I have about things like homosexual marriage don't affect how I treat people at work. You know, I'm not a marriage celebrant. I don't conduct weddings. I treat all my patients with the same respect and courtesy. Everyone who needs their cholesterol treated gets the same prescription. It doesn't matter how they define their sexuality. But unfortunately, this does seem to be the way the world is going. Look at what happened to Israel Folau. He got totally screwed over for what he said on social media, outside of work, outside of rugby. In my case, it seems that what they're essentially saying is that what I've said about these topics reveals I've got a dodgy character, I'm the wrong kind of person to be a doctor.
So what does all this mean? Does it mean that you're going to be deregistered, that you can't practice as a doctor?
I think that deregistration is what they intend. For now, they've suspended my licence to practice.
So you can't work as a doctor at the moment?
Correct, anywhere in Australia.
When were you suspended?
August 2019.
So you've been without work for 7 months now?
Yes, yep. We were a one income family. My wife has been a full-time mother for the kids since our eldest was born. So now that my job's been taken away, we've had no income at all.
So how are you feeding your family and paying the bills?
Yes, by the grace of God, we've had some savings, which we're living off for now. And we've been given some money by generous people. So far I haven't had to find alternative work. But if my licence isn't restored, then yes, I'm going to need to find some new work. And that'll be a big change because I've been doing the same thing for 15 years or 20 if you count the time I spent training.
But you're a doctor, you must be super rich, right?
Yeah, look, I never went into medicine to make money. Don't lay up treasures on earth, said Jesus. I bulk bill about 3/4 of my patients. I don't work a massive amount of hours. It's important for me to get home and see my family. We're just ordinary people. We live in the outer suburbs. We're paying off a mortgage. We've got our kids enrolled in public school. We've got kinder fees to pay. I drive a 20-year-old bomb. We donate to Christian ministry and charity. A GP's income is comfortable, but it isn't extravagant, especially when it was our family's only income.
So talk to me about your patients. This must be affecting them as well?
Yep. I think it will be hard for many of them. Just going by memory, as a little exercise, I counted over 100 people who saw me very regularly as their doctor. These were elderly people with complex medical problems, people who'd confided a lot of very personal stuff with me. And beside that, look, there'd be another couple hundred whose names haven't come back to me yet. There was people I was visiting at home because they were too frail to come to the clinic. Now, I've got some very excellent and competent colleagues, so I'm sure the patients will be well looked after. But I still think it'll be difficult for many of them. When you've had one doctor look after you for years, with all the complexities of your health issues, who's gotten to know a whole lot of your personal stuff, you've become attached to them, and changing doctors isn't like changing your fridge repairman or TV repairman. Something else, the way these immediate suspensions work. I was told you're suspended, and I wasn't even allowed to do a proper handover of my patients. That's potentially quite dangerous.
So you're quite concerned about your patients as well?
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I spend a whole lot of time worrying about them, like I said. I think they're in good hands. But at times I do find myself missing them. They become almost like friends after a while. I've had a couple of run-ins with patients at the shops, that sort of thing. One of them even asked me about my kids when I saw him. How nice is that? I've also received several cards, letters, messages of support and affection from some of my patients. So I appreciate that very much.
Okay, so do you think you might have been better off just keeping your opinions to yourself?
That's a complex question to answer, Mark. Look, are there some things I might have said differently? Of course. When you look back on 10 years worth of stuff, I can look back at particular comments and say I might have worded that one a bit differently. There might have been a more elegant way to make that point. But look, on the other hand, some of the stuff they're holding against me is 8 to 10 years old. That was before people were routinely hunted down, doxed, chased out of their jobs because they'd said something politically incorrect. That was before most companies had rules about social media for their employees. It wasn't until 2014 that Brendan Ike was forced out of Mozilla for opposing homosexual marriage. The big blow up about Sonia Kruger and her remarks about Islam, that was 2016. Secondly, I'm not a public figure. I'm not a star rugby player, I'm not a TV presenter or CEO. The things I write on my personal Facebook page are for my friends and family. If I get 10 reactions to something, I feel like it's gone viral.
So you weren't ever expecting someone to pay thousands to trawl through, several years of your online content?
No, I wasn't. Then, you have to look at the fact that some of the stuff that I'm being punished for were just plain statements, like a surgeon can't change a man into a woman and children shouldn't be given puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. They've taken issue with that very measured opinion piece that I wrote 5 years ago for the Christian magazine about transgenderism.
And so if we take a step back from all this, there's really the issue of free speech, isn't there?
I'd like to think so. These topics like abortion, Islamic terrorism, gender theory, these have been high-profile topics of public debate for years now. And sure, saying politically incorrect things like abortion is a massacre of babies, or it's bad for children to be raised in a same-sex family, or the West is under attack from Islam, that sort of stuff is going to offend some people if they hear you say it. Remember, I'm not someone with a public profile. But yeah, if you can't go out there in your own time and state your opinions about these important issues, if you can't say provocative, confronting things that will challenge the groupthink, you have to wonder if there is such a thing as free speech anymore.
So was any of this a personal attack on anyone?
Of course not. I haven't defamed any individual. I haven't harassed or stalked or threatened anyone. I haven't used profanity or vulgarity. Look, I get it that when some people hear a Christian saying that certain types of behaviour or relationships are immoral, they might take that personally. They might be offended. But that's not the same as being personally attacked or harassed.
So what do you think their expectation is? Do they think that Christians should completely just shut up even when these topics are being discussed quite openly in the public domain? You've got Hollywood, you've got the news, all these things are being discussed in the open. Yeah,
and in schools too. Last year, our son came home one day with the book Heather Has Two Mummies in his school bag. He just picked it off the library shelf. I don't think he realised what it was about. So these radical ideologies, they're being pushed everywhere, like you said, in the media, by Hollywood. They're affecting our children directly. We're hearing more and more about things like drag queen story times. But despite all this, religious and traditional people are supposed to smile and say nothing.
So it's all very one-sided, do you feel, where it's almost like living in communist China or someplace like that, where it's just one opinion?
Yeah. Look, the bottom line is this. If in your personal and professional interactions with people, you're respectful with everybody, if you do your job well, it shouldn't matter if you speak up for traditional beliefs about things like gender, in your own time as a private citizen. We're supposed to live in a democracy, a marketplace of ideas, but it doesn't feel that way.
So you've got a government agency spending months and thousands of dollars basically pursuing you for what amounts to a thought crime.
Yeah, I've actually spent the last couple of months reading through...
Plenty of time.
That's right, reading through Orwell's 1984. And it resonates.
Well, I'm sure it does. So, do you know of anybody else, any other doctors have gone through a similar experience?
Yes, in fact. So there was one other doctor, a specialist, also from Melbourne. I've met him, he's a nice guy. He had complaints made about him for a couple of things he wrote on Twitter during the gay marriage plebiscite. The medical board came down very, very hard on him. They didn't strike him off, but basically made it impossible for him to keep working. He was literally going to be sent for re-education, and if he refused, he wouldn't be allowed to keep practicing. This doctor he was going to try and fight them, but in the end he looked at the legal fees and he decided to walk away from the profession. He's a bit older than me. He doesn't have very young kids to feed, so that was more of an option for him. I can't reveal any more details about this doctor without his permission. Then, of course, there was David Van Gen, a well-known GP from Queensland. His experience was made very public. The medical board went after him a year or two ago for what he posted on Twitter about transgenderism. But David stared them down and they backed off. He's a great guy. He's written a book about how gay marriage deprives children of their fundamental right to a mother and father. And he's still very active. He's writing articles, tweeting. Just a couple of months ago at Halloween time, he wrote a brilliant article about about bearded women and how transgender hormones and surgery is spooky science. It's a scandal. You know, the idea of changing someone's sex is just bonkers. David's a good man and he's got a large following. I think they wouldn't dare to touch him again.
So that's where we've come to. We've got authorities actually going after doctors for thought crime, but shouldn't they be actually pursuing doctors who are committing malpractice or actual crimes?
As a matter of fact, they did try to suspend a doctor who's been charged with rape. But last year he fought them successfully in court and he was allowed to go back to work. Then there was this other doctor recently who kept his own personal slave, who he drugged and bullied. The medical board, they took a look at him, but in the end decided to let him continue practicing medicine. You can go and make an appointment with him if you want.
I'm sure I'll do that. So that's where we've come to. Doctors who commit actual serious crimes are allowed to continue practicing medicine, but someone like you, whose only offence is thought crime, are pursued to the point of disqualification.
Mark, look, it's quite bizarre to think that if I'd only got myself a slave, I'd be in a better position than I am now.
So how do you feel about what happened to you? Are you angry about it?
Yes. I am angry at times. I'm angry that I've had my job and my livelihood, my family's livelihood taken away when I've done absolutely nothing wrong in my work after all the effort that I've put into looking after my patients well over the years. I've committed no crime. I'm angry about the harm that's been done to my family, my kids, my patients, who've had their doctors suddenly ripped away with no explanation. The inconvenience to my colleagues who were already working very hard and now they have to work even harder to pick up my patients and my home visits, my evening shifts, my weekend shifts. Yeah, look, so I think I'm entitled to feel a bit bloody angry. But look, anger's not the whole thing because we've got a faithful God. He forgives sin. He forgives my sin, he forgives your sin, and he can also forgive the sin of the people who have taken these actions against me. I know that justice will be done eventually, even if not here on this earth, then eventually before his throne, when everything's put right again.
So you think that this is an example of persecution?
Look, there's nothing surprising about being attacked for our beliefs. A few weeks ago, a wise old friend and minister read this passage from John chapter 17 to me. It's the words of Jesus. I've given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Look, the world has always persecuted Christians for their strange beliefs. You know, once we were accused of being cannibals and practitioners of incest who refused to bow down to Caesar. Now we're homophobes, transphobes, bigots who refuse to bow down to the rainbow flag.
Well, certainly the West is becoming more hostile to Christians, and here in Australia, in Victoria and Queensland, you've got moves to criminalise helping people who are dealing perhaps with same-sex attraction or gender confusion. What's your response to that?
Yeah, look, I think it's all getting worse, but it's impossible to suppress the truth. It's like what Princess Leia says to the Empire in Star Wars. You know, the more they tighten their grip, the more people will revolt against the tyranny. They will squash a few people, like me, but others will keep on saying what needs to be said about these important topics. There will always be a rebel alliance.
So one last thing probably needs to be discussed. You've got an accusation against you that you were inciting some form of genocide. What's the story behind that?
Mark, that is a vile accusation. It's based on a comment that I made on Bill's blog 8 years ago. I invite everyone to go to that article written by Bill. It's about racial eugenics. Read the article, read my comment, and you decide for yourself what I was and wasn't saying there. If you've got Year 7 English comprehension skills, you'll see it straight away. Look, I don't know how that accusation about genocide came about. Whether it was some kind of careless mistake made by somebody who didn't bother to look at the material properly, or indeed it may have been something malicious, but quite frankly, anybody who carries on about it will be guilty of defaming me.
Well, we'll leave it there for now, and we've got plenty more to discuss, and we'll sit down for another interview a bit later.